Welcome to this week's Real Estate Q&A, where I discuss 5 comments or questions from the last week on our YouTube channel. So keep your comments coming. I just may pick yours to discuss in next week's video. And in this video, I'll also touch on the current state of the U.S. housing market, as well as discuss why now that the plaintiffs have won their class action commissions lawsuit this week, homebuyers may now have to pay their agent's own commission when buying a home, adding even more pressure to homebuyers scraping their finances together to achieve home ownership. If you're new to the channel, I'm Todd Sachs, a Maryland real estate broker, and our channel is dedicated to everything real estate. You should know I actively work in the real estate industry. I'm not just a YouTuber who pretends to do so. Welcome back. It's no surprise that reduced home sales is now the current story amongst real estate agents, loan officers, title companies, home inspectors, appraisers, and anyone else depending on home sales to pay their bills. This also includes real estate brokerages like myself. Hey, but after all, I survived the 2008 housing market crash, and because of that, I know what's possible with the current real estate bubble. Well, actually, it's not just a real estate bubble, it's a everything bubble. So let's hold on and strap in. This might get bumpy, guys, and you may want to consider reducing any wasteful spending if you haven't already done so. If the U.S. economy doesn't get as bad as many forecasters expect, then the end result will mean that you have saved some money over the next 12 to 18 months. Now let's discuss what's going on now with the housing market. As many as 50% of the active homes for sale right now have experienced price reductions. And for many, these price reductions occurred after the home was under contract at least once, and then fell through as contract cancellations across the entire country are on the rise. Many of these cancellations are from buyers just waking up one morning and realizing that they're making a massive mistake by buying a home right now. In September alone, over 16% of the homes under contract had their contracts canceled by the buyers. And in Atlanta, Georgia, for the same period, almost 25% of the contracts were canceled. Guys, that's 1 in 4. So sellers that must sell now have to come to the realization that buyers can no longer afford the monthly payments and are no longer willing to forego contract contingencies like we experienced from 2020 through earlier this year. For example, we're now seeing almost every buyer requiring home inspections. And now, as a result of the home inspections, buyers are demanding the sellers fix broken items throughout the home, replace end-of-life roofs, water heaters, and heating and air systems. And now with the higher mortgage rates, buyers are asking sellers to pay for mortgage rate buydowns and pay cash at closing for down payment assistance. If sellers refuse, the buyers are just walking away. With the current 30-year mortgage rates north of 8%, Zillow has recently calculated that anyone buying a home today without a seller-paid rate buydown will wait about 13 and a half years to break even on their home. This means if you sell before the 13 and a half years, you will more than likely lose money. I personally believe that this will be the case for most buyers who purchased a home from 2021 through today. And according to an article that is on businessinsider.com, released just a few days ago, housing market affordability plunges to the lowest level since 1985. And what this means as we look at this chart is that the housing affordability index has dropped below 100. And that signifies that a family or home buyers trying to qualify for a mortgage don't make enough income to qualify for a mortgage on a median priced home. And this is according to the National Association of Realtors. And speaking of the National Association of Realtors, if you haven't heard, Tuesday, a jury in the first of its kind commissions lawsuit awarded the plaintiffs $1.8 billion in damages after finding that the National Association of Realtors and brokerages like Keller Williams, Home Services of America, RE/MAX, and Anywhere Real Estate conspired to artificially inflate commissions paid to agents. Many buyers and sellers feel that part of the unaffordability in the housing market today is due to agents conspiring to keep commissions artificially high and charging too much to home sellers to list their homes. Some say this makes home sellers raise their prices to justify paying agents their high commissions in order for the listing agent to share compensation to the buyer's agent for bringing their ready, willing, and able buyers to the closing table. Now, besides this lawsuit that the National Association of Realtors and Brokerages lost this week, let's talk about how the National Association of Realtors has also been under investigation by the Department of Justice. Do you ever wonder where the term realtor came from and why we don't call home salespeople real estate salesmen? Because if you want to sell homes today, it's almost impossible to do so without becoming a member of the National Association of Realtors. They trademarked and coined the name realtor, and you must be a member of NAR to use this designation. Now, part of NAR's scrutiny by the Department of Justice partly stems by its said unfair practices like preventing non-realtors from accessing the association's own MLS, restricting access for non-realtors wanting to show buyers homes listed by realtors who use the association's electronic key lockbox systems, and restricting non-realtors' access to important contract forms and sellers' disclosures required by the sellers using realtors to list and sell their home. These controls implemented by NAR makes it essentially impossible for any real estate brokerage or real estate salesperson to sell homes for a living without joining the National Association of Realtors. Now, this win for the plaintiffs in the class action lawsuit, who, by the way, happen to be Missouri home sellers, about 500,000 of them, now may set precedent on how buyers' agents get paid in the future. States like New York have already announced that as of January 1, buyers' agents will need to negotiate their own commissions with the home seller directly, meaning the listing agent will no longer set the fee for the buyer's agent commission. Now, the sellers must determine who's more valuable in selling their home, the seller's agent or the buyer's agent. We know one thing for sure: most first-time home buyers can't afford to pay their own agent directly. This would yet be another fee, preventing the barrier to entry for the almost lost American dream of homeownership. Maybe this satisfies those in charge saying rent forever and be happy. Now, let's get to those comments and questions. The first comment addresses my last video where I said that the NAR and brokerage lawsuit will probably wipe out a lot of the part-time agents who actually can be toxic to the real estate transaction. And I've personally seen where part-time agents were hired because they were friends with the buyer or seller, and the buyers or sellers didn't realize just how inconvenient it can be for their agent to not be available during their full-time job hours. And that these dual career agents obviously put their full-time job first, understandably so, as this is their guaranteed income. However, this commenter says, "You're hitting home today. We originally hired our friend and it was a nightmare. It's her side gig, not available when we want to put in an offer, seems burdened by us, puts her comfort level before our needs. We decided to fire her and interview other agents. 7 agents later, we finally found a great one." People, please interview several agents and ask critical questions like, are you full-time? This is the largest purchase or sale most people make in their entire life. Make sure you avoid the initial nightmare you heard from this commenter. Our next commenter says, I appreciate all the information you have for us, but I kindly ask you to stop saying that new agents won't do a good job. Thank you. I don't believe I have ever said that new agents don't do a good job. What I say is to make sure that your agent is experienced, full-time, and has transacted recently. If they haven't sold a home in 12 months, they aren't directly aware of the current market climate and may advise their clients wrong. For example, you may think that buyers still need to pay $50,000 over appraised value to win the sale, and they don't. So no offense, though everyone has their first day on the job, we're talking about selling homes here, not coffee at Starbucks. And there's a lot to know. Too many agents are sloppy and select brokerages based on where their friends work, whether the management is good or not. My advice if you're new is to get with a great agent and shadow them during a dozen or so sales. Offer to work for them for a small cut or even for free to learn the business. Too many agents fly by the seat of their pants and cause their clients and everyone else involved with the transaction grief. And to be honest, it's partly why people dislike agents altogether. Our next commenter is talking about appraisals. Appraisers knowingly breach their fiduciary responsibility by lying about values. The most common thing they did was to use the market data method. Now, I'd like to turn to the article on examsmart.com as it talks about the market data approach. It says the best way to value residential property or vacant land is by using the market data approach, which is all about looking at comparable properties. The market data approach is based on the principle of substitution, which says that a property is only worth what one can get another property for just like it. Now, the problem with this approach is obvious. It's based on sales of similar homes within the same subdivision that have sold within the last 6 months to a year. And now that sales are few and prices are dropping and sellers are giving cash contributions to buyers at the closing table, home values can pale in comparison to home values of a year ago when buyers were paying well over list price. Now, many believe a more stable way to evaluate properties is the cost approach. It says in the same article that there are 3 steps involved in the cost approach. The first step is to estimate the current replacement cost of the property. The second step is to subtract depreciation based on the age of the property. The third and final step is to add the current land value. Remember that land never depreciates simply due to the passage of time. Now, appraising a home based on the cost approach would make certain considerations to a home that has aging systems that need updating, like driveways, heating and air systems, roofs, windows, etc. This would make too much sense, but the fact is that it would cost a lot more money for the appraisal process. But I can tell you it would keep home values realistic according to the amount of work that a property needs to keep up with other homes in the neighborhood that have been updated. You see, if you install a new roof on your home that you're selling, based on the market data approach for appraisal, you won't get a higher appraised value for having a new roof, as it's not expected that a buyer would buy a home with a roof that leaks. Now, let's talk about something else that I believe that real estate agents should not be allowed to do, and buyers and sellers should be aware of this type of practice. It's called dual agency. This is where an agent represents the buyer and the seller on the same property. Nicole says, I'm licensed in West Virginia and they allow for dual agency or double-ended deals. I choose not to participate in this. When I'm faced with a situation that could become double-ended, I refer the other party to an agent that I know is a good and fair agent and do not charge a referral fee. I do this because it's in the best interest of both parties and does not pose a potential conflict of interest. How in the world can anyone represent opposing sides' best interests? It's illegal for an agent to represent both sides in Maryland, and if you're a buyer or seller in a state where this practice is allowed, like in Nicole's state of West Virginia, I don't recommend it. Get your own agent to represent your best interest. Agents who are allowed to legally double end the commission based on representing opposing sides of a home sale should be banned from doing so. And that leads us to our final question. And what is to prevent buyers from going straight to the listing agent and not pay a commission at all? Will the listing agent request another buy-side commission from the buyer in that case? All right, so let me try and explain what this question is all about. So currently the way it stands, when a seller is selling a house, they pay the listing broker a set fee, a commission, to handle the sale of the home. In that fee, the listing agent shares a portion of that with the buyer's broker. Now, the lawsuit that we've talked about wants to abolish that. They want to say that the seller will pay separately a commission to the listing broker and a commission to the buyer's broker, right? That the seller's going to control all that, what they pay, the percentage, the fee, whatever. So basically what this question is referring to in this situation, if this is the case, becomes the case nationwide. The seller decided to sell. They agreed with the listing agent to sell the house for their fee, their cut, minus what they would have typically offered or what they would have offered a buyer's broker. Now, let's say like this question's being asked, what happens if the buyer then comes to the listing agent and doesn't have a buyer's agent? So the seller's not required to pay, in this case, the buyer's broker, right? They don't have one. They're just going straight to the listing agent. Will the listing agent go to the seller and say like, hey, you paid me to list the house. Now this buyer wants me to write the contract, handle the inspections, or do whatever, provide key service, not represent them unless the state allows so. But now they may go to that seller and say, look, you didn't pay me for this. And they don't have an agent. So now I want more of a fee to handle the buyer. So I believe that, yes, the new listing agreements may talk about that. It may say that, look, you're paying me a listing fee, but should that buyer not have an agent, then you're going to pay me an additional X amount of dollars to facilitate the transaction. I mean, after all, it is more work that's involved, and it actually puts that listing agent in a state where dual agency is not allowed. It puts them at a higher risk to where that buyer may think they're getting representation based on conversations that take place. So I think it's a higher liability. I would probably think that they would request that they just go ahead and get an agent anyway and negotiate the commission at that point. But anyway, guys, I appreciate you watching this video. If you got a little nugget out of it, just learned something today, you could hit that thumbs up button. It'll let me know that you did. And if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, consider doing so now. Smash that alert bell. You'll know every time I upload content. And as I said in the beginning of the video, go ahead and keep those comments and questions coming. You never know, you might be on next week's Real Estate Q&A. See you next time. Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.